Thousands of people have come from all over the country to the Lincoln Memorial here in Washington, D.C. to protest against vaccine mandates that are being implemented throughout the nation. The Defeat the Mandates rally drew attendees from across the country in a broad variety of political stripes. Physicians, attorneys, grassroots organizers and activists, athletes and musicians, all ages and walks of life were on hand. It's part of a global protest movement that has gained momentum as governments have installed increasingly restrictive vaccine mandates and passport regimes.
Whatever you want to call this movement, the medical freedom movement, you could call it that, is one of the largest protest movements across the globe of our lifetimes. And when indigenous protesters from El Alto in La Paz, Bolivia, Moroccans in Casablanca, Iranians in Tehran, Swedes in Stockholm, Germans in Berlin are all protesting the mandates in their own societies, then this isn't a left-right issue. It's about the global 99% fighting against a cold and ruthless machine that seeks to reduce every individual to a QR code.
But in the days and hours leading up to the event, mainstream media outlets, many of which do paid advertisements for pharmaceutical corporations, were calling them anti-vax. The McCarthyite smear applied to anyone who questions the official narrative about the pandemic response. They cited anonymous government officials to warn that the protesters could be violent extremists.
And officials fear extremist groups will be there.
These extremist forums are into this rally.
More and more bringing in extremist elements.
So the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Metropolitan and U.S. Park Police, and others are helping local businesses prepare for the crowds and possibly confront protesters who may refuse to wear masks indoors or provide vaccination cards or comply with D.C. rules.
Early in the morning before the crowds arrived, NBC was on hand. Last night on MSNBC, they were declaring that this rally was full of extremists. Does that seem like a fair description of you or what you've seen here so far?
That definitely doesn't seem like a fair description. No, it's kind of a fishy narrative to put out ahead of the game. You know, like I have a good feeling that this is going to be a worthwhile event that's going to maybe bring people together.
As the morning went on, rally-goers congregated at the Washington Monument before marching to the Lincoln Memorial. At the center, an organization of firefighters protesting the mandate. Still, there was no sign of violence. As for extremism, some held signs calling to decrease the polarization that has gripped the nation over the past several years, thanks in no small part to mainstream media. Some blame the vaccine mandates on socialism and others on capitalism. Either way, the crowd was perhaps the most politically diverse to have ever gathered on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
I love that people are out here for a common cause. There are people who are here representing religion. There are people here representing politics. I'm here representing what I believe in, and that's children should not be vaccinated with an experimental vaccine. It's that if you've recovered from COVID, you shouldn't be required, no one should be required to have a vaccine if they don't want it. And that doctors should be able to do their jobs without restriction. We know a vaccination card does not equal a negative COVID test. We know that it doesn't prevent transmission. It makes zero sense besides trying to force order on people.
My message is that there can't be gray area in making decisions that are right for our bodies. Like, there's so much hypocrisy on both sides. I mean, the left decided to champion my body, my choice, yet now a lot of them are completely backpedaling on that and saying that we're not respecting other people by not getting vaccinated, and we know that's just not true.
These school nurses came from New Jersey and will soon be fired as they will not comply with imminent vaccine mandates.
For New Jersey, you're not fully vaccinated unless you are double vaxxed plus the booster. And that all starts February 28th as well, which happens to be my birthday. Happy birthday, right? You're losing your job.
Thank God I'm close to retirement, because and that's partly why I'm out here for all the other parents and other healthcare workers that don't have a choice, that have to put food on their table.
New York City firefighter Sophie Medina says firefighting crews were already short-staffed before the vaccine mandates.
The workforce was already depleted, and this has just depleted it even more. It's going to affect everyone, whether or not, whatever area you stand for, like with the vaccine or not vaccine. The fire doesn't care. The emergencies don't care.
New York City subway conductor and union representative Tramell Thomas called for unity.
Let's stop the division. Let's stop the separation. Let's not buy into the segregation portion of this. This whole entire rally, this fight back was about choice from the beginning. It was about being anti-mandate and not anti-vaccine. A lot of people didn't know that I am vaccinated, right? I'm one of the leading voices in this movement. And when we first hit the scene, the media was like, they anti-vaxxers. And I'm like, how can we be anti-vaxxers and I'm vaccinated? So, my message is going to be a message of unity as Americans. I don't care what race, religion, color, creed. We're going to come together and we're going to fight these mandates together. Vaccinated or unvaccinated. Don't care about your political party. We just go come together.
Tricia Lindsay is a civil rights and constitutional attorney. She's been outspoken in opposition to New York City's vaccine mandates. She says they've been particularly harmful in Black and brown communities.
We already didn't have equal access to certain services, benefits, and things of that nature. So now what happens when we now have to walk around with vaccine passports in order to gain access to benefits, to restaurants, to schools? It's back to the slave passports. Are you free or you're not free? You can't go here if you're not free, or you're clean or not clean, And so it's almost PTSD. It brings up, because it's going back way out of hundreds of years.
Activists like Joe Rose have done civil rights movement-style disobedience to protest New York City's vaccine passports.
I was actually arrested December 15. I will never forget. It's very similar to the civil rights movement, because that's what Martin Luther King and other many great activists did. They went in places that they were told that they couldn't go in. Some of them got arrested, beaten down. And I can't believe that people do not see the correlation to that. Yeah, it's not being done by race anymore, but it's being done by vaccination status, and it's wrong. And not just myself getting arrested, other New Yorkers have gotten arrested. Even children are being removed from restaurants. And once you start targeting children, that's the lowest of the low. And, it makes me feel dirty. It makes me feel like I'm no longer human. I'm being dehumanized. Stand for what's right, okay? Whether you took the vaccine or not. This is a fight for equal rights. Remember, they're going to keep asking for more and more and more. And when you say no, you'll be considered unvaccinated, and then you'll be on my side, okay? Stand up. All right? Put the differences to the side. And remember that it's us, we the people, versus the 1% elites.
Retired NBA player Kwame Brown spoke about the pressure athletes face to take COVID vaccines.
They're afraid. They're attacking Kyrie because he's a big superstar. That's against the norm for a superstar to not follow protocol. I like to call it the go along, get along gang on my YouTube. A guy like Kyrie Irving, they care more about him controlling the minds of others than they do about Jonathan Isaac. So celebrities are under a tremendous amount of pressure because they use celebrities to control the black community, in my opinion.
Days ahead of the rally, headline speaker Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had already been smeared in the Washington Post. Those efforts continued ahead of his speech.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., noted anti-vaxxer and conspiracy theorist.
It's been the ambition of every totalitarian state from the beginning of mankind to control every aspect of behavior, of conduct, of thought, and to obliterate dissent. None of them have been able to do it. They didn't have the technological capacity. Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did. I visited in 1962 East Germany with my father and met people who had climbed the wall and escaped. So it was possible. Many died doing it, but it was possible. Today, the mechanisms are being put in place that will make it so none of us can run and none of us can hide.
It was part of that excerpt that mainstream media outlets like the Daily Beast and Rolling Stone seized upon to discredit his message. No surprise, the Daily Beast also does paid advertisements for Pfizer. Yet Kennedy's statement is factually accurate. Bill Gates is putting up a vast network of surveillance satellites, and even mainstream outlets admit 5G is used for surveillance. Stephanie DeGarry says the dangers of COVID vaccines are very real, and she would know. Her 13-year-old daughter, Maddie, was left severely injured after volunteering for Pfizer's COVID vaccine trial.
The zaps, up and down, electrical shocks up and down your spine. She had severe abdominal pain in her lower right abdomen. Her heart, she said it felt like it was being ripped out of her neck. She pain all over her body. Her toes and her fingers were white. Her body was having a severe immune response, is really what it comes down to.
Yet the hospital that administered the trial has shirked responsibility, and Pfizer has legal immunity.
So we are seeing 4 new doctors that are not covered through insurance, but will do the appropriate tests and give her the appropriate treatment. So that means we pay out of pocket.
At the same moment that I was interviewing Stephanie DeGarry, MSNBC, which does paid advertisements for Pfizer, was a few yards away, smearing people like her as anti-vaxxers.
The message here is very anti-vaccination. It's been a misinformation fest. We've seen misinformation about the so-called dangers of vaccines.
When you talk about anti-vax, all that, they're trying to make it something bad, and all it is people that something happened to their kid or somebody they love and they didn't get help. That is what anti-vax is. It's, you didn't help me, now I'm afraid. It's afraid of vaccine, because how do I know this isn't going to happen to my other kids? How do I know what's going to happen the next time she gets the vaccine?
What needs to be nailed to the wall, needs to be held up and made accountable are those news agencies that forced and, lied about the dangers of this vaccine, forced a product upon the people and stood behind that forcing of that product, a product that had never gone through proper safety trials. We are supposed to be asking the questions. We're supposed to stand on the same platform with the same pillar of truth as science is, which is the scientific method. That method demanding that we challenge and ask the hard questions of any hypothesis, any product that is out there. And instead, we towed the line for a product that was not properly safety tested, that is going to make billions of dollars for the people that made it, and is totally protected from liability for all those that are injured. They will have no recourse, and we will never see this product evolve and be made safer because of that liability protection.
Perhaps those most vilified are the physicians and scientists who have advocated early treatment and questioned the quality of the COVID vaccines.
What we are trying to do is bring good quality data to the public and let them know, look, early treatment works. We have plenty of strategies. The vaccines are leaky, and we don't recommend them at this time for pretty much almost anyone. There's going to be other good vaccines. Almost everyone, I think 99% of the doctors that were up there today have been taking vaccines. Their kids have all had vaccines. I have 6 kids, 300 vaccines in my kids. It's not an anti-vax movement. It's basically a good science movement. And that's what we really want people to know, is that there's a better way. There's a better way, and that's our goal, is to lead a better way.
Dr. Mary Bowden was suspended by Houston Methodist Hospital for writing on social media about treating COVID-19 with ivermectin, the Nobel Prize-winning anti-parasitic drug. She resigned and opened her own practice. Now she's suing the hospital where she used to work.
And the hope is to see if they have any financial ties to vaccine companies. Are they being rewarded for using the protocols that they're using? Are there executives getting financial windfalls from what's been going on? So hoping it will just shed some light on conflicts of interest.
Dr. Aaron Kheriaty taught medicine at the University of California, Irvine, and was director of medical ethics at the University of California, Irvine Hospital. He sued the university on behalf of patients who had gained natural immunity and was fired for refusing to take the COVID vaccine. He's now part of an action to force the FDA to release Pfizer's clinical trials data.
I, along with several of the other doctors and scientists here and many others who are not here today, filed a Freedom of Information Act against the FDA to get the clinical trials data on which authorization of their vaccine was based. FDA came back at us and said, we can give you 500 pages a month, which, if you do the math, means that the clinical trial data would have been available in 75 years, after most of us are going to be gone. Our lawyer, Aaron Siri, came back, said that's absurd. went to the judge agreed, ordered Pfizer to get that data out within 8 months. So in the next, they should be putting it out immediately, but at least in the next 8 months, we're going to have that clinical trials data. We're going to have external independent researchers looking at it. It's going to be available to the public, and we're going to start getting more answers on safety and efficacy of these vaccines.
Dr. Paul Alexander is a research scientist who was appointed to the Trump administration. He advocated for protecting the vulnerable and against lockdowns for the general public.
Our approach was you strongly protect the vulnerable, the elderly in society. You make reasonable decisions and precautions, but you basically let the rest of society live normal, largely normal lives with safety precautions as needed. We didn't have to lock down. We didn't have to close schools. It harmed and killed our children.
The vast majority of people who complied with the lockdowns did it with good motives, right? I want to protect the elderly. I want to protect the vulnerable.
These doctors say that the government's medical and scientific advisors knew that the lockdowns would not achieve the stated goals of stopping the spread, but would inflict damage on society.
I think there were some bad actors who had political or financial or economic motivations for the lockdowns, who saw COVID as an opportunity to re-envision society and social relations, and assume power and gain new methods of social control.
Hundreds of thousands of people died, and not from the virus. They died from the policies of the CDC, the NIH. You know, put it this way, I don't even blame Trump, and I never blame Trump, and I don't even blame Biden. It's not a political thing for me. I blame the bureaucrats and the technocrats in those agencies. It was their decisions that these presidents and these governments implement. They're not scientists. They depend on their scientific agencies to inform them. So there's something wrong with our scientific agencies too that we need to look at, because they've been flat wrong on every policy.
As lockdowns took their toll, the media turned a blind eye.
We were getting data very early, from about May of 2020, that people in the different states in America, business owners, employees laid off, and particularly children, they were self-harming themselves and they were committing suicide. We had many little children in America from the different states who committed suicide, and the media would not cover it back then because Trump at that point was calling on the society to open in schools. So the media's decision was, we can't cover these suicides in the kids because it will make Trump look good. It was a very perverse thing that we did as a society and that we allowed, because we had indications of little children hanging themselves in America. It was a devastating situation, and we must never allow this to happen again. It harmed our children, the lockdowns, harmed them.
Attorney Parisa Fishback is working to hold legally accountable those who crafted lockdown policies, mask mandates, and vaccine mandates that had disastrous effects on public health.
A lot of it boils down to discrimination of a certain class for a unreasonable and arbitrary reason, quite frankly. When the vaccines do not prevent infection or transmission, you are no longer dealing with public health or safety at that point. So when the law is unreasonable and arbitrary, then it's discriminatory in its action to segregate that class of people.
With the mild Omicron variant now dominant, the pandemic appears to be all but over, though Western governments continue to implement restrictive policies.
You have now the media and different experts are beginning to talk about, well, maybe we should have to live with the virus. That's what we said from the beginning. This is a virus. It's a mutating virus. It's a respiratory virus. It will likely become endemic. We said that 2 years ago. And like how we live with common cold coronaviruses today. They were pandemics at some point 200 years ago, and they became endemic. And the viruses will mutate to milder and milder versions. And now Omicron. The good news is Omicron has presented the global community with a gift. It's almost an off-ramp, an exit strategy, if you're willing, if you're brave enough to take it, governments. Because it's basically the pandemic is over. And that's what we're saying, that we need to be bold and brave as societies now to say it's time to finish this and declare the pandemic emergency over. And let us live our lives and take reasonable precautions.
The rally ended abruptly when police cut electricity and swept the stairs of the Lincoln Memorial. Despite the cacophony of mainstream media warnings of potential violence, The rally was peaceful and ended without incident, leaving me to wonder who are the real extremists.